Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we do some gardening chores during the month of January. So let's go. It is January 22nd, and even though it's still very cold here, Zone 5B in New Hampshire, there's still snow on the ground. We have freezing temperatures. I've been busy. I've been doing a lot of seed starting indoors, and I've shared some videos with you recently showing you my process for starting seeds. And in many of the videos, I show you that I like to start my seeds in a large type of takeout container tray, just so that it saves space under my grow lights. And then it also gives me something fun to do, which is looking for seedlings to emerge in the soil and then transplant them or prick them out and put them into 6-packs. I also like to do this process because sometimes not all the seeds are going to germinate. And that way, if I put it in a container like this, I'm pretty much only pricking out the seeds that germinate. We recently planted some seeds together in a previous video, and one of them was called the Hybrid Cucumber Quick Snack. And it's from Seeds and Such. And I had made a video that just basically showed the process for me starting these seeds and what they look like and some just details about the plant itself. My intention for growing a couple of these plants is to keep them indoors. I'd like to grow them during the winter months so I can enjoy some cucumbers. I mean, how nice would that be? Fresh cucumbers indoors during the winter months. I'm really hoping that this experiment works. And I call it an experiment because I myself have never tried to grow cucumbers indoors, but I did look for a shorter variety of cucumber and I settled with this variety, and I'm really hoping it works out. So what we had done is we planted 2 cucumber seeds, and the date was January 19th. So it was only a few days ago. And then I put this whole tray on a heat mat where the temperature stays between 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And this morning when I opened this up, I was so excited to see that not just one, but both of the cucumber plants had germinated. So I figured let's start off our video today with just transplanting these cucumber seedlings out of this tray and into a 6-pack. So I don't need a lot of supplies to do that. I have my seed starting mix in here, and I keep it in this pot because I like to make my own seed starting mix, and then I like to use boiling hot water and sterilize it just to make sure that I don't have an infestation of fungus gnats. And so far I haven't found any, which is a good sign. And then I have these 6-packs here, and I had recently sterilized them all. So they're all nice and clean. I like to use them year after year, especially if they're in good condition. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put in some seed starting mix in here. And it's nice because this seed starting mix is pre-moistened, so we don't have to worry about that. And I like to push down, not too hard, but enough to get out any air pockets. And I just use a regular pen to prick out seedlings, and you can use whatever you have available. This works for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make 2 holes because I only have 2 seedlings that we're working with right here. And I'm very carefully going to hold the seedling by its leaves. I don't want to hold the seedling by the neck of the plant because that could damage it. So I very gently want to hold the seedling by its leaves and then push down below it. And you can see that it actually has a really good root system to it already. And I'm just pushing the soil back around the base of the plant. And now we can do the second one. Looks so cute. And I'm pushing the seedling down as far as I can, but I want to make sure that the green part stays above the soil mix. And now what I can do with this tray is just cover it back up. The saran wrap acts as basically a humidity dome. It keeps everything nice and humid in there because I still have some tomatoes as well as peppers planted in here. And then this can go back on the heat mat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put a label in here. It's, for me anyway, it's pretty obvious what a cucumber plant looks like because I've been growing cucumber plants for a long time in my garden outside. But still, it's always a good habit to label your seedlings. So I'm just going to put down cucumber on here. And I might as well put down that it's a quick snack. And you'll notice that I still have room here for 4 other plants that can go here. I definitely will put some sort of plant there. I'm not going to do that right this second, but I have additional room here for other plants. And then once the cucumbers get even bigger, what we'll do is we'll prick these plants out and we'll put them into a bigger pot. But for right now, they have been bumped up. I always joke around when I talk about bumping plants up. It's like going from a small studio apartment to a bigger condo. So anyway, they've been bumped up to bigger area of living. So they should be happy now. And I don't need to water these because I can tell that this soil is still pretty wet when I pre-moistened the seed starting mix. So I don't need to add any additional water. So the next thing I thought we'd do is continue along this track of transplanting seedlings. The next plant I want to talk about is spinach, and I have here 6 spinach plants that we had started together and an additional 6 right here. They're looking good. They're looking healthy. And in this 6-pack, I only have 4, so I figured we might as well transplant one additional one that has popped up. And when it comes to when did we actually start the spinach seeds, we planted those on January 14th. So these spinach have gotten to a good size in such a short period of time. Now in this tray, there are a bunch of other plants planted in here, and some of them are older seeds, so I'm just waiting to see if they'll sprout. We have parsley, spinach, and cilantro. And I'm noticing that this soil is dry, at least on the top part. I have been bottom watering these, and in another video, I'll show you my process for bottom watering my plants. Now, I'm a math teacher. I've also been a robotics teacher, but in this high school that I work at, I asked our chemistry teacher if he had something that would help me with watering, especially like really teeny tiny seedlings like my begonias, and he gave me this. And it had never been used, but I cleaned it out anyway just to be safe. And so I know it looks funny, but it works for me. And then if I want to water just like a certain area, like the center of this cell, I can just add a bunch of water right here. It's usually not a good idea to like take a watering can and just water on top of your plants. It's better to bottom water. But because we're moving a small seedling into here, I just want to make sure that the center part of the cell is nice and wet. So I'm going to use my pen again, and I'm just carefully breaking the seedling out. It's amazing the roots that a lot of these plants have, even though they're so little. And that's what that looks like. You'll notice when you start working with seedlings and plants that sometimes they don't lose the seed part of the top of the plant. And in this case, that was true. It still has the top part of the plant attached to it, the seed coat. And I'm going to leave it for now. I typically like the plant to try to release that seed coat by itself. And if it's struggling, because that does happen sometimes where the plant is growing, but it still has the small part of the seed attached to the leaves, then you can help it and take that off. But you have to be really careful when you do that. So I'm going to give it a little bit of time. And in another video, I'll also show you my process for removing something like that if that happens. But that's it for the spinach. That was pretty easy. And I did notice one cilantro is just barely sprouting. So in another video, we can start pricking out the cilantro and putting those into our trays here. This is going to go back on the heat mat, and I'm actually going to put all these plants right here back under the grow lights behind me. The next plant I want to show you, I'm very excited about. These are the Brussels sprouts that we started on January 17th. And they've actually grown quite a bit in a short period of time. And that's what they look like. So they've actually put on a good amount of growth. It will be interesting to grow this plant. Since I've never grown it before, I'm not really sure what to expect. I've done some research and it looks like they're in the brassica family, so they're treated very similar to like cabbage and broccoli, which means that the cabbage moth will love to devour this plant. And so I'm going to have to protect it with some sort of netting. I see that they can get pretty tall and they need their space to grow. So I'm going to have to think a little bit about that. And also, because I live in a very cold climate, it looks like I can get away with growing these in the springtime and then trying for a fall crop as well. Whereas in the warmer climates, pretty much you have to grow these, from what I've researched, more towards the fall time into the winter months. So this will be a very good experiment for me for this year. And I'll definitely show you the progress on how things look. But I'm motivated and I want to enjoy some Brussels sprouts. So I'm going to have to give them the proper care that they will require. So I figured we'd start with taking some of the Brussels sprout seedlings that are in this tray here and start moving them into this tray that has the cucumbers in it. I'd love to know if you've ever grown Brussels sprouts. And if so, did you start them from seed? Did you buy the plant? And did you grow them in the spring or the fall? And how did your plants do? Please leave a comment below and let me know, because I'd love to know, what are your tips or tricks for success? So you can see that it has a very nice root system to it as well. And again, when it comes to handling the plants, you either want to handle them by the leaves or just down below here. It's like a nice and hard down below. You don't want to handle the plant by like the neck part of the plant, because you can damage the plant that way. I will not start fertilizing my plants until they have at least a couple of sets of leaves on them. They have enough of what they need at this stage, but definitely once they have their second set of leaves, I'll start fertilizing them. And again, I will be sure to show you the process along the way of everything that I'm doing, which is a big reason why I'm going to be making a lot of these types of videos. So in case you're new to my channel and you haven't seen any of my old videos, you can still follow along on what I'm growing. And I'm hoping that these videos motivate you to try growing some of these plants as well. And because of where I live, I don't have a ton of sun in my yard. And so I have to be a little crafty with how I grow my vegetables. I will be growing a lot of my vegetables in pots. So I think that's good to show you if you also don't have a lot of sun in your yard. Even though I live on a couple of acres, I technically have the space. I just don't have the right location because that space is not necessarily very sunny. But I have found in the past that when I grow vegetables in pots and I put the pots in a sunny location in my yard, they do really well. So that hopefully will motivate you if you're in the same boat in terms of light conditions or space issues also. Maybe you don't have a lot of space, but you want to still have vegetables. You can grow in pots. I'm going to leave the rest of these for me to work on later. I planted too many. I'm going to have to share some already. I know that because I have way too many of these plants here. But at least I've planted some here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is just label these. And I'm going to put these under the grow lights behind me. And for this one here, I'm not going to cover it up because the plants are getting pretty tall. So this is also going to go under the grow lights behind me. But by the end of today, my goal is to have everything pricked out of here that's already germinated. And what I end up doing a lot of times is I will prick out all the plants that I see. But there is most likely another plant or 2 or 5 that have not germinated yet. So what I do is I prick out the plants that I can see, and then I just give this a drink of water just because I can tell it's starting to get a little dry. I'll cover this back up and let the other seeds germinate, whatever's left to germinate. So I pulled this tray out because I just wanted to show you something else that I worked on recently. I had some wire vine that I collected from the center of town close by to my house. It was in a big pot. It looked beautiful. And, when it comes to plants that are like a vining type, they could be invasive. They could be an invasive perennial in certain parts of the world. But here where I live in New Hampshire, they're not considered invasive. So it's safe for me to go ahead and propagate it and use it in different pots. I just think it will look so pretty. So that's what's in here. And what I've been doing is taking cuttings off of it and rooting more of them. And all I'm doing is just cutting them at a node and then making sure there's no leaves at the bottom part of it, putting it in the seed starting mix that's been pre-moistened, and then putting a humidity dome over that. And within a week, they're rooting, which is great. I want to make sure I have a good stock of plants for all my hanging baskets, window boxes, and containers because I have a lot of them and I love to just fill them up with lots of different plants. So I plan on using this plant here. And the other plant that I'm trying to propagate from cuttings is Dichondra silver falls. Now, that is also considered an annual here, and it's not invasive. It dies in the winter times, but I did keep some pieces in my garage overwintered, and they look great. So I took some small cuttings off of those, and that's what's over in these 3 cells. And I'm noticing this cell here needs a little bit of water, so I'm going to add some water to it. And actually, this is the 4th Dichondra silver falls here that I'm trying to root. And then these are just 2 more of the wire vine that's over here that I took cuttings of recently and I'm trying to root. So I'm just going to take some water and I'm going to be careful not to put the water on the leaves of my plant. And I'm just using, this is a tomato container, or it had tomatoes in it. I got it from Sam's Club. And I'm just using it to as a kind of like a humidity dome. I figured that would be fun and just I'd give you an update on that. And behind me, I also have some basil started and I also have some Swiss chard. I showed you those in a previous video, so those are all looking great as well. So for our next project, what I'd like to do is sow some pansy seeds. And I collected a bunch of pansy seeds in the fall time. I have the pansy celestial blue, and that's a really pretty pansy. So I collected a whole bunch of seeds from those. And then also this, I just call this pansy mix. And this is actually seeds from 2022. So they're a little old. And I have pansies that hopefully overwinter outside for me. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't want to take a chance. And I also want to have instant gratification in my pots and containers, window boxes, hanging baskets, whatever, wherever I'm going to plant the pansies. Probably a little bit in all of those. And I want to have some pansies ready to go, put outside around April timeframe. So I figured let's just get these planted today. And all I'm doing is, you can see I'm running out of seed starting mix. I'm going to have to make some more and sterilize it. I'm just taking this and putting this in this tray. I try not to put too much of the potting mix in here because I'm literally only just using these trays, as you've seen in my videos. I'm just using them to just barely grow my plants to a size where I can then transplant them into a 6-pack. So I just filled it about halfway. And what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to just do half filled with the celestial blue pansies and half with the pansy mix. And as a divider, I'm just going to use one of my plant labels right here. So when it comes to sowing the pansies, I just want to look up the depth at which to plant them. Because these are seeds that I have collected, clearly I don't have them marked with the depth. And I'm looking at my notes and it says that the ideal temperature for germinating pansy seeds is between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So I plan on putting this tray, when we're done with it, on a heat mat. And you definitely want to start your pansy seeds about 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost. Our last frost generally is sometime between the middle to end of May, so it's a great time for me to be starting these. And I want to start them with plenty of time so that they're blooming, hopefully by the time I plant them outside. And also, pansies need darkness to germinate. And so we're going to plant them about a 1/4 inch deep. We're just barely going to cover them up. And it's a fair amount of seeds that we're starting on one side of the tray. I really hope the pansies that I have outside in the ground overwinter, but just in case they don't, at least I'll have these. And I'm planting them very heavily because you can see in a small amount of space, I am putting quite a few seeds in here. And then you don't want to forget to close the little Ziploc bag because that would be awful if the seeds went everywhere. The next one we're going to do is the Pansy Celestial Blue. Last year was my first time growing these seeds. And so just like with any seeds that you collect, you take the chance that the plant might not look like the original plant. And I'm okay with that. I'm a backyard gardener. I'm just gardening and putting these flowers in my own landscape. So I'm okay with that, the fact that the plants might not all look identical to each other. I think there's some beauty in that as well. And before I forget, I'm actually going to put this bag here and this bag here so that when I put the saran wrap on, I can remember which side has which pansy. The next thing is just to take some of this potting mix or seed starting mix, and I'm just barely covering it. And even though it says they need darkness to germinate, I can tell you that there are times that the pansies in my yard drop their seeds and the seeds germinate. So I am just covering them lightly, but the fact that they drop their seeds and still germinate tells me that if you don't cover them very much, they'll still be fine. Even though this is pre-moistened, we're going to add a little bit of water. And I just have one of those hand sprayers that I'm using. And I have some saran wrap. The saran wrap is very handy. I just love using things that I already have in my house. So on this side, we did the pansy mix. And on this side, the celestial blue. And the date is January 22nd. I'm going to be placing this just on a heat mat. And then I'm just going to check it regularly. And then at that point, when I see germination happening, I can start pricking out the plants as they appear and put them in 6-packs. So I know I'm packing a lot of different things in this video. A lot of my videos are going to be that way, especially this time of year, because I just have so many different projects I'm working on. And I think it's good for me to show you the different things that I'm doing. So I've been doing a lot of winter sowing. I started pretty much the beginning of January, and I had saved up a bunch of water jugs, milk jugs during the whole summer into the fall. And so I ended up with quite a few milk jugs. I also saved my milk jugs from last year. So I have a ton of winter sown milk jugs outside, but I figured we might as well do one more together, even though I've done them in previous videos. And the one that I want to do together is a type of poppy. It's called Heirloom Poppies, Lauren's Dark Grape, and it's by Renee's Garden. And I bought these last year. From what I've seen, poppies can be very tricky to grow, especially because when it comes time to transplanting them. So I will be experimenting with poppies because I myself have not really grown a lot of poppies. And I have a ton of seeds. And I think a reason why I have a ton of seeds is I buy them, but then I'm not sure how to grow the plant. And so I want to do some winter sowing of poppies. I want to sow some poppy seeds outside, scatter them in some of my flower beds. I've read that you can just do that by sprinkling them on the snow. And once the snow melts, the seeds will drop down onto the ground. The key with that method, though, is I need to make sure I do it in a place where there's no other plants that are going to be coming up. And I do have some flower beds that are fairly empty. They're not full of like mulch. That's the other thing. You don't want to be scattering these where there's a bunch of mulch. You want to scatter them on a space that's like nicely open and clean. So with just soil. So I'll be doing that. I also want to start some of these indoors. And then I think it will be good for me to share with you which method worked the best. And because I want to be successful growing poppies, and I want you to be successful growing poppies. So we are going to use this milk jug here, and this is one from last year, and I can tell because it's a little bit dirty. I mean, I did rinse it out, but it's still, I can tell that it's used from last year. And you want to make sure that you don't keep the cap on. I did cut some drainage holes in the top here. That's not necessary, but I like to do it just to add additional drainage. And on the back side here, I didn't cut all the way through so that this can act as a hinge. And you want that. You want to be able to open this up once the weather warms up and it gets really hot outside. And the bottom part, you want to make sure that you can put at least 4 inches of soil in there. And it's preferred that you don't use seed starting mix, that you use some sort of a potting mix. But you don't want to use potting mix that has water retention in it because you don't want to retain too much water in here. And then on the very bottom, I also have drainage holes. And this works out really well. It's translucent, so it does allow light to come in. And basically, it acts as a mini greenhouse. And you can use other different types of containers as well. My preference, though, has been milk jugs. So I'm going to go ahead and add the soil in here. And I have a big bucket over here. And this is just potting mix that I put together myself. I love the winter sowing method. I just think that it's a great way to grow plants if you don't have grow lights indoors. And even if you do have grow lights indoors, it allows you to grow some of your plants outside and not have to use your grow light space inside. I especially like using the winter sowing method for perennials because many perennials require a cold treatment or a cold stratification treatment, and they need kind of that moist kind of cool weather. So you can mimic that and put perennial seeds a lot of times in your refrigerator, but I prefer to do this method. It's kind of no fuss, set it in, pretty much forget it. Here where I live, we get a lot of snow and the temperatures are freezing. So once I've done this whole process and put these outside, they're pretty much going to freeze. But I realize some of you watching this video, you might not have those freezing temperatures. You definitely want to make sure that you're watering these jugs because if it gets dried out, the plants are going to die. You don't want it too wet. You don't want it too dry. So for me, I will wet this today. I will set it outside. It will get snow and it will get rain, but it will also freeze. And when the time is right, it will thaw out. It will still rain. And if it's not raining, I will check it and give it water. And each of the seeds will germinate when their time is right and they're ready to germinate. It's actually a really cool process. So now that the potting mix is in here, we're going to go ahead and scatter the seeds. And you want to read the seed packet just to see the sowing depth. And what it says on the packet is broadcast the seed as thinly and evenly as possible and rake in gently. And that's if you're outside, you want to rake it in. And then it says, or lightly cover it 1/8 of an inch deep. And from what I've seen with these type of seeds, with poppy seeds, you pretty much don't need to cover them. So I'm actually not going to cover them, but if you did want to, it has to be just a very, very light layer. And this packet has quite a few seeds in it. So I'm not going to use all of them because I want to experiment and sow these seeds a bunch of different ways. Now the key will be for me to make sure that when I do prick these seedlings out, that I do it when the plants are very, very small. Because as time goes by and the plants get bigger, that means they're going to be even harder to move. And poppies don't like to have their roots disturbed. So I think you have to kind of be smarter than the poppy and move them right when they're a very small size. And all I'm doing is very gently just spreading the seeds around inside the milk jug. I like to heavily seed my milk jugs because I have so many seeds I want to start. I want to enjoy the plants out in my landscape. I have a backyard plant nursery. I want to sell plants. So I need a lot of plants. And I'm willing to take the time to prick plants out and pot them up and grow them on to a bigger size. But if you don't want to do that, then you might just want to plant only a small amount of seeds in your milk jugs. And that way the plants can grow and get a little bit bigger without you having to pot them up. And you don't have to pot them up. You can just transplant them out in your landscape. I just like to baby my plants. I just want them to be at a bigger size before I actually put them out in the landscape. I'm going to label this, and what will happen is the label will go on the inside. The reason I like to put the label on the inside is sometimes, even when you label on the outside, the snow, the rain, the elements might wash away the marker, and then you don't know what's inside of here. So I like to label it on the inside as well as the outside. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and give this a good drink of water. And I'm trying to be careful with the stream of water coming out because I don't want to dislodge the seeds everywhere, because a very heavy stream of water can cause the seeds to dislodge. So you want to try to just have a gentle stream. And I'm not trying to water it all the way through. I'm not too worried about that. I just want to make sure I get at least the top layer. And now I'm using just regular duct tape. And I like to just put a few pieces. I feel like it's not necessary to tape it all the way around. My experience has been, generally speaking, the duct tape holds really well, even with all the snow and the rain and the wind that we get, which is really nice. And when it comes to closing the milk jug, you don't need to close it 100%. If there's a small gap on the side here, that's all right. Don't get too hung up about that. I know some of my milk jugs, especially some of the previous year's milk jugs, they've kind of lost their shape. They're a little deformed in shape, and that's okay. And this is even one of them. You can see that it has like a small little lip that's open there, and it is totally fine. And now what I'm going to do is label on the milk jug the plant and the date that it was planted. I like to just label it on both sides, but that's not necessary. All right, let's go outside and I'm going to show you where this is going to go. So we've had some freezing cold temperatures lately, but today is nice out. So I've been doing all this winter sowing and I've been keeping these on my side porch, which is covered, but they need to get moved. They need to go out where they're going to get some snow and rain. So let's get these moved. Well, I'm glad that these milk jugs are where they're supposed to be. And I wanted to point out over here, I will come back out probably tomorrow with a shovel, move the milk jugs and just shovel out the snow from beneath them because they're definitely slip sliding around and they need to be on more level ground. I just don't want them to fall in the wind or anything like that. So I will do that tomorrow. And what I've been doing with my other milk jugs is trying to put like type of plants together. And right now, all these jugs are just placed randomly. So when I do this tomorrow and shovel around them, I'll also put like all the baptisia together or all the poppies together, just because it makes it easier when I'm looking at the seeds emerging. You will see over here that under the snow are a whole bunch of milk jugs. And if you look down over there, I have a whole bunch of milk jugs too. So I am going to town with doing my winter sowing, which I'm very excited about. And I can't wait to do a reveal on how those look later in the season. If you like the content of this video, please hit the like button below. And if you have any questions or any comments, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment below. Until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.